Chapter 4. Disgust for worldly enjoyments is inculcated so that dispassion might be developed. On hearing the sweet words of her infatuated lover, who is all the time pressing her to his bosom, that stainless girl, wishing to teach him, smiled gently and spoke with good sense as follows. Listen to me, O prince. It is not that I do not love you, only that I am trying to discover what the greatest joy in life is, which will never become distasteful. I am always searching for it, but have not attained it as yet. Though always looking for it, I have not reached any definite decision, as is a woman's way. Will you not kindly tell me what exactly it is, and so help me? Being thus coaxed, Hemalekha laughed derisively and told his beloved, "Women are indeed silly. For do not even the birds and beasts, nay, the crawling insects, know what is good and what is bad? Otherwise, how are they guided in the pursuit of good, and how do they escape from bad? That which is pleasing is clearly good, and that which is not so is bad. What is there in it, my dear, that you are always given to thinking about? Is it not silly?" Hearing her lover speak thus, Hemalekha continued, "True that women are silly and cannot judge rightly, therefore should I be taught by you, the right discerner. On being rightly taught by you, I shall stop thinking like that. Also, I shall then be able to share in your pleasures to your entire satisfaction. O king, subtle judge that you are, you have found happiness and misery to be the results of what is pleasing or otherwise. But the same object yields pleasure or pain according to circumstances. Where is then the finality in your statement? Take fire, for example. Its results vary according to seasons, the places, and its own size or intensity. It is agreeable in cold seasons and disagreeable in hot seasons. Pleasure and pain are therefore functions of seasons, similarly of latitudes and altitudes. Again, fire is good for people of certain constitutions only, and not for others. Still again, pleasure and pain depend on circumstances. The same reasoning applies to cold, to riches, to sons, to wife, to kingdom, and so on. See how your father, the Maharaja, is daily worried even though he is surrounded by wife, children, and wealth? Why do not others grieve like this? What has happened to enjoyments in his case? He is certainly on the lookout for happiness. Are not his resources all directed to that end? No one seems to possess everything that is sufficient for happiness. The question arises, cannot a man be happy even with such limited means? I shall give you the answer. That cannot be happiness, my lord, which is tinged with misery. Misery is of two kinds, external and internal. The former pertains to the body, and is caused by the nerves, etc. The latter pertains to the mind and is caused by desire. Mental distraction is worse than physical pain, and the whole world has fallen a victim to it. Desire is the seed of the tree of misery and never fails in its fruits. Overpowered by it, Indra and the Devas, though living in celestial regions of enjoyment and fed by nectar, are still slaves to it, and work day and night according to its dictates. Respite gained by the fulfillment of one desire becomes another. Desire before another takes place is not happiness, because the seeds of pain are still latent. Such respite is enjoyed by the insects also, which certainly do not typify perfect happiness. Yet is their enjoyment distinctly better than of men because their desires are less complex? If it is happiness to have one desire among many fulfilled, who will not be thus happy in this world? If a man, scalded all over, can find happiness by smearing unguents on himself, then everyone must be happy. A man is happy when embraced by his beloved. He is unhappy in the same act under other circumstances. Fatigue is certainly produced for everybody after the flurry or passion of copulation, just as there is fatigue for an animal carrying a load. Lord, how do you see that as happiness? Let this be declared to me, as much as there is pleasure for you in union with the beloved arising from the friction in the nadis, nerves, arteries, or veins. Is it not the same for dogs having a similar union? Tell me that. If what is greater than that above-mentioned pleasure is the one arising from the beauty of the beloved, seen or enjoyed by you, then that is produced from mere conceit or fanciful notion, as it is in the union with a woman in a dream. Beauty is only a mental concept, as it's evident from the similar feeling and similar enjoyments of lovers in dreams. I shall tell you a story to illustrate the point. There was once a most handsome scion of a king, fairer than Cupid himself. He was wedded to an equally beautiful damsel and was very devoted to her. But she fell in love with a servant of the royal household who deceived the young prince very skillfully. This servant used to serve liquor in excess so that the prince got drunk and lost his senses, and on retiring, a wily harlot was sent to keep him company. The unchaste princess and the servant were then able to carry on, and the foolish prince was embracing the other woman in his intoxication. Yet he thought within himself that he was the happiest of men to have such an angel who was so devoted to him for his wife. After a long time it happened that the servant in the pleasure of work left the liquor on the prince's table and occupied himself otherwise. Consequently, the prince did not drink as much as usual. Becoming voluptuous, he hastily retired to his bedroom, which was sumptuously furnished, and enjoyed himself with the strumpet, without recognizing her in the heat of passion. After some time he noticed that she was not his wife, and in this confusion asked her, "Where is my beloved wife?" She trembled in fear and remained silent. The prince, who suspected foul play, flew into a rage, and holding her by hair, drew his sword and thus threatened her, "Speak the truth, or your life will not be worth a moment's purchase." Afraid of being killed, she confessed the whole truth, taking him to the trysting place of the princess. There he found her, with her lovely and delicate body in the close and loving embrace of the dark, ugly, loathsome savage, who was his servant. The prince was shocked at the sight. Shortly afterwards he pulled himself together and began to reflect as follows: "Shame on me who am so addicted to drink. Shame on the fools infatuated with love for women. Women are like nothing but birds flitting above the treetops. Ass that I was all the time loving her even more than life itself. Women are only good for the enjoyment of lecherous fools. He who loves them is a wild ass. Women's good faith is more fleeting than streaks of autumnal clouds. I had not till now understood the woman who, unfaithful to me, an entirely devoted husband, was in illicit love with a savage, all the time feigning love to me, like a prostitute to a lecherous fool. I did not, in my drunkenness, suspect her in the least. On the other hand, I believed that she was as much with me as my shadow. Fie! Is there a fool worse than myself, who was deceived by this ugly harlot at my side and enthralled by her professions of love? Again, what has the other woman found in preference to me, in a loathsome brute? The prince then left society in disgust, and retired into a forest. Hemalekha continued, "So you see, O prince, how beauty is only a concept of the mind. What pleasure you have in your apprehension of beauty in me is sometimes even exceeded by others in their love of their dear ones, be they fair or ugly. I will tell you what I think of it. The fair woman that appears as the object is only the reflection of the subtle concept already in the subjective mind. The mind draws an image of her beauty in conformity with its own repeated conceptions. The repeatedly drawn image becomes clear and clear until it appears solidly as the object. An attraction springs up and enslaves the mind by constant mental associations. The mind, becoming restless, stirs up the senses and seeks the fulfillment of its desires in the object. A composed mind is not excited even at the sight of the fairest. The reason for the infatuation is the oft-repeated mental picture. Neither children nor self-controlled yogis are excited in the same way because their minds do not dwell on such things. So whoever finds pleasure in anything, the beauty therein is only mental imagery. Ugly and loathsome women, too, are looked upon as delightful angels by their husbands. If the mind conceives anything as loathsome and not delightful, there will be no pleasure in such. Fie on human beings who appraise the foulest part of the body as the most delightful. If one should see beauty in that bodily part which is wet with impure excretions, where would he not see beauty? Tell me. Listen, Prince. The idea of beauty lies in one's own desire, innate in the mind. If, on the other hand, beauty is natural to the object of love, why is it not recognized by children too, as sweetness in edibles is recognized by them? The form, the stature, and complexion of people differ in different countries and at different times. Their ears may be long, their faces distorted, their teeth large, their nose prominent, bodies hairy or smooth, their hair red, black, or golden, light or thick, smooth or curly, their complexions fair, dark, coppery, yellow, or gray. All of them derive the same kind of pleasure as you, Prince. Even the most accomplished among men have fallen into the habit of seeking pleasure from woman, for all consider her the best hunting ground for delight. Similarly, also, a man's body is thought by women to be the highest source of enjoyment. But consider the matter well, Prince. Shaped of fat and flesh, filled with blood, topped by the head, covered by skin, ribbed by bones, covered with hair, containing bile and phlegm, a pitcher of feces and urine, generated from semen and ovum, and born from the opening from where urine is ejected. Such is the body. Just think of it. Finding delight in such a thing, how are men any better than worms growing for offal? My king, is not this body, pointing to herself, dear to you? Think well over each part thereof. Analyze well and carefully what it is that forms your food materials with their different flavors, kinds, and consistencies. Everyone knows how the consumed foods are finally ejected from the body. Such being the state of affairs in the world, tell me what is agreeable or otherwise. On hearing all this, Hemachuda developed disgust for earthly pleasures. He was amazed at the strange discourse he had heard. He later pondered over all that Hemalekha had said. His disgust for earthly pleasures grew in volume and in force. He again and again discussed matters with his beloved so that he understood the ultimate truth. Then, realizing the pure consciousness and hearing as the self, to be that selfsame Tripura. He became aware of the one self holding all, and was liberated. He was liberated while yet alive. His brother Manichuda and his father Muktachuda were both guided by him and were also liberated. The queen was guided by her daughter-in-law and was liberated. So also did the ministers, chieftains, and citizens gain wisdom. There was no one born in that city who remained ignorant. The city was like that of Brahma, the abode of happy, peaceful, and contented people. It was known as Visala and became the most renowned on earth, where even the parrots in the cages used to repeat, "Meditate, O man, on the self, the absolute consciousness devoid of objects. There is naught else to know besides pure consciousness. It is like a self-luminous mirror, reflecting objects within. That same consciousness is the subject, and also the objects. And that is all, the mobile and the immobile. All else shine in its reflected light. It shines of itself. Therefore, O man, throw off delusion. Think of that consciousness which is alone, illuminating all and pervading all. Be of clear vision. Those holy saints, Vamadeva and others, having on one occasion heard these sacred words of the parrots, wondered at the wisdom of even the birds of that city and named it the City of Wisdom. The city is today still called by that name. Dattatreya continued, "Association with the sages, O Rama, is thus the root cause of all that is auspicious and good. By association with Hemalekha, all people gained jnana, wisdom. Know then that satsanga, association with the wise, is alone the root cause of salvation." Thus ends the 4th chapter on the fruits of satsanga. In the section of Hemachuda in Tripura, Rahasya. Chapter 5. On Bondage and Release. Parasurama, on hearing the Master's discourse on the greatness of satsanga, was highly pleased and continued to ask, "You have truly said, O Lord, that satsanga is the harbinger of all that is worthy, and illustrated the fact with the story. One's enjoyments are determined by the quality of one's company. The highest good was accomplished by all, owing to their association, direct or indirect, with Hemalekha, though she was only a woman. I am anxious to hear how Hemachuda was further guided by her. Please tell me, thou Lord of mercy." Thus requested, Dattatreya said to Parashurama, "Listen, O Bhargava, I shall now continue the holy narrative." Having heard what she had to say, the enjoyments ceased to interest him. He developed a disgust for them and became pensive. But the force of habit still remained with him. He was therefore unable either to enjoy himself or to desist all of a sudden. He was, however, too proud to confess his weakness to his beloved. Some time passed in this way. When his habits forced him into the old ways, he was still mindful of his wife's words, so that he engaged himself in them with reluctance and shame. He repeatedly fell into his old ways by force of habit, and very often he became repentant, realizing the evil of those ways and remembering his wife's wise words. His mind was thus moving to and fro like a swing. Neither delicious foods, nor fine clothes, nor rich jewels, nor charming damsels, nor caparisoned horses, nor even his dear friends continued to interest him. He became sad, as if he had lost his all. He was unable to resist his habits at once, nor was he willing to follow them knowingly. He grew pale and melancholy. Hemalekha, always aware of the change in him, went to him in his private chamber and said, "How is it, my lord, that you are not as cheerful as before? You look sad. Why so? I do not see symptoms of any particular ailment in you. Doctors may hold out the fear of disease amidst the pleasure of life. Diseases are due to loss of harmony in the three tempers of the body. Diseases remain latent in all bodies because disharmony of tempers cannot always be prevented. Tempers get displaced by food consumed, clothes worn, words uttered or heard, sights seen, objects contacted, changes of seasons and travel in different countries. Being inescapable, the dislocation of tempers need not claim one's constant attention. There are remedies prescribed for diseases arising from it. Medical science does not treat of invisible diseases. Now tell me, dear, why are you so sad?" When Hemalekha had finished, the prince replied, "I will tell you the cause of my misery. Listen to me, dear. What you said on the last occasion has barred all means of pleasure for me, so that I can now find nothing to make me happy. Just as a man under orders to be executed cannot relish the luxuries provided for him by the state, so also I do not relish anything. Just as a man is forced by royal command to do something in spite of himself, so also must I engage in old ways by force of habit. Now I ask you, dear, tell me how I can gain happiness." Being thus approached, Hemalekha thought, "This dispassion is certainly due to my words. There is the seed of the highest good in that field where such symptoms appear. Had my well-calculated words not produced even the slightest turn in this direction, there will be no hope of emancipating him. This state of dispassion only arises in one with whose continued devotion to Tripura, inherent in the heart as the self, is well pleased." Thinking thus, that wise lady was eager to reveal wisdom to her husband. Keeping her own wisdom secret at the time, she spoke with measured words. "Listen, Prince, to the story of my own past. Formerly my mother gave me a lady-in-waiting who was good by nature, but later associated with an undesirable friend. This friend was clever in creating new and wonderful things. I also, without my mother's knowledge, associated with her. That lady-in-waiting became very friendly with that undesirable companion, and I was obliged to do the same because I loved my friend more than life. For I could not remain without her for even a second, so much did she enthrall me by her undoubted purity. Always loving my friend, I quickly became part of herself. She, for her part, was all the time close to her friend, a wicked strumpet, who was ever generating new and fascinating things. In secret, that woman introduced her son to my friend. That son was an ignorant fool, with eyes bloodshot with drink, and my friend went on enjoying him in my very presence. But she, though completely overpowered by him and being enjoyed by him day after day, never left me, and I too did not abandon her. And out of that union was born a fool, of the same type as his father. He grew up to be a very restless young fellow, fully inheriting his father's dullness and his grandmother's wickedness and creativeness. This boy, Master Inconstant by name, was brought up and trained by his father, Mr. Fool, and his grandmother, Madam Ignorance, and he became skilled in their ways. He could negotiate the most difficult places with perfect ease and surmount obstacles in a trice. In this manner, my friend, though very good by nature, became afflicted and silly because of her association with wicked people. What with love for her friend, devotion for her lover, and affection for her son, she began gradually to forsake me. but I could not break with her so easily. Not being self-reliant, I was dependent on her, and so remained with her. Her husband, Mr. Fool, though always in enjoyment of her, mistook me for one of the same sort and tried to ravish me. But I was not what he took me to be. I am pure by nature, and only led by her for the time being. Even so, there was widespread scandal about me in the world that I was always Mr. Fool's hold. My friend, entrusting her son, Master Inconstant, to me, was always in the company of her lover. Mr. Inconstant grew up in my care, and in due course married a wife, with his mother's approval. Unsteady by name, she was ever restless and changeful, and could put on different forms to please her husband's whim. By her wonderful capacity to change and by her exceeding skill and cleverness, she brought her husband completely under her control. Mr. Inconstant, too, used to fly hundreds of miles in a twinkling of an eye and return, go here and there and everywhere, but yet could find no rest. Whenever Mr. Inconstant wished to go anywhere, and whatever he wanted to have in any measure, Madame Unsteady was ready to meet his desires, changing herself accordingly and creating new environments to please her husband. She thus won his affections entirely. She bore him 5 sons who were devoted to their parents. Each one was skilled in his own way. They were also entrusted to my care by my friend. Out of love for my friend, I brought them up with care and made them strong. Then those 5 sons of Madame Unsteady individually erected splendid palaces, invited their father to their homes, and entertained him continually in turns. The eldest of them entertained him in his mansion with different kinds of sweet music, with incantations of the Vedas, the reading of scriptures, the humming sounds of bees, the twittering of birds, and other sounds sweet to hear. The father was pleased with the son, who arranged for still further sounds for him, which were harsh, fearful, tumultuous, like the roar of the lion, the peal of the thunder, the raging of the sea, the rumblings of earthquakes, the cries from lying in chambers, and the quarrels, moans, and lamentations of many people. Invited by his second son, the father went to stay in his mansion. There he found soft seats, downy beds, fine clothes, and some hard things, others hot or warm or cold or refreshing things with various designs, and so on. He was pleased with the agreeable things and felt aversion to the disagreeable ones. Then, going to the third son, he saw charming and variegated scenes, things red, white, brown, blue, yellow, pink, smoke gray, tawny, red, brown, black, and spotted, others fat or lean, short or long, broad or round, bent or heavy, pleasing or horrible, nauseous, brilliant or savage, unsightly or captivating, some pleasing and others otherwise. The father was taken to the 4th son's mansion, and there he had fruits and flowers to order. He had drinks, things to be licked, to be sucked, and to be masticated, juicy things, some refreshing, like nectar, others sweet, sour, pungent, or astringent, some decoctions of similar flavors, and so on. He tasted them all. The last son took the father to his home and treated him with fruits and flowers, with various scented grasses, herbs, and things of different odors, sweet or putrescent, mild or acrid, others stimulating or soporific, and so on. In this manner he enjoyed himself uninterruptedly, one way or another, in one mansion or another, being pleased with some and repulsed by others. The sons, too, were so devoted to their father that they would not touch anything themselves in his absence. But Mr. Inconstant not only enjoyed himself thoroughly in his sons' mansions, but also stole away things from them and shared them in secret with his dear wife, Madame Unsteady, in his own home, unknown to his sons. Later, one Madame Varax, a voracious eater, fell in love with Mr. Inconstant, and he wedded her. They became very devoted to each other. Mr. Inconstant loved Madame Voracious, heart and soul. He used to fetch enormous provisions for her. She consumed them all in a moment and was still hungry for more. Therefore she kept her husband always on his legs to collect her food, and also she was incessantly in quest of more provisions for her. She was not satisfied with the service of the father and his 5 sons put together, but wanted still more. Such was her insatiable hunger. She used to order all of them about for her needs. In a short time, she gave birth to 2 sons. They were Master Flaming Mouth the elder and Master Mean the younger, both of course very dear to their mother. Whenever Mr. Constant sought Madame Voracious in privacy, his body was burnt by the wrathful flames of Master Flaming Mouth. Being thus afflicted, he fell down unconscious. Again, whenever he fondled the younger son out of his love, he was hated by all the world, and he himself became as if dead. Mr. Inconstant thus experienced untold misery. Then my companion, good by nature, was herself afflicted because of her son, Mr. Inconstant's grief. Being also associated with her 2 grandsons, Master Flaming Mouth and Master Mean, she became quite miserable and gave way under the public odium. I too, dear, collapsed in sympathy with her. Thus passed several years until Mr. Inconstant, dominated by Madame Voracious, lost all initiative and was entirely in her hands. He was foredoomed and betook himself to the city of 10 Gates. There he lived with Madame Voracious, his sons, and his mother, always seeking pleasure but only sharing misery day and night. Burnt by the wrath of Flaming Mouth and treated with contempt by Master Mean, he swung hither and thither greatly agitated. He went into the homes of his other 5 sons, but was only perplexed, without being happy. My companion, too, was so affected by her son's plight that she again collapsed, and yet she continued to live in the same city. Madame Voracious and her 2 boys, Master Flaming Mouth and Mean, was being fed by Madame Ignorance, her husband's grandmother, and by Mr. Fool, her father-in-law. She got well on with her co-wife, Madame Unsteady, and was even intimate with her. Ingratiating herself with all of them, she completely dominated her husband, Mr. Inconstant. I, too, continued to live there because of my love for my friend. Otherwise, none of them could remain in the town without me, who was their protectress, though I was moribund, owing to my friend's moribundity. I was sometimes suppressed by Madame Ignorance, was made a fool of by Mr. Fool, became inconstant on account of Mr. Inconstant, grew unsteady with Madame Unsteady, incurred the wrath of Flaming Mouth and the contempt of Master Mean. I reflected within myself all the moods of my friend, for she would have died if I had left her for even a minute. Because of my company, the common people always misjudged me for a strumpet, whereas discriminating men could see that I have always remained pure. For that supreme good one, my mother is ever pure and clear, more extensive than space, and subtler than the subtlest. She is omniscient, yet of limited knowledge. She does all works, yet remains inactive. She holds up all, herself being unsupported. All depend on her, yet she is independent. All forms are hers, but she is formless. All belong to her, but she is unattached. Though illumining all, she is not known to anyone under any circumstances. She is bliss, yet not blissful. She has no father nor mother. Innumerable are her daughters, like me. My sisters are as many as the waves on the sea. All of them, O Prince, are just like me, involved in their companions' affairs. Though sharing the lives of my friends, I am in possession of the most potent spell, by virtue of which I am also exactly like my mother in nature. When my friend's son retired to rest, he always slept soundly on the lap of his mother. As Mr. Inconstant was asleep, all others, including his sons, were also asleep, for no one could remain awake. On such occasions the city was guarded by Mr. Motion, the intimate friend of Mr. Inconstant, who was always moving to and fro by two upper gateways. My friend, the mother of Mr. Inconstant, along with him and her wicked friend, the same was her mother-in-law, watched the whole sleeping family. I used to seek my mother in that interval and remain blissful in her fond embrace, but I was obliged to return to the city simultaneously with the waking of the sleepers. This Mr. Motion, the friend of Mr. Inconstant, is most powerful and keeps them all alive. Though single, he multiplies himself, manifests as the city and citizens, pervades them all, protects and holds them all. Without him, they would all be scattered and lost like pearls without the string of the necklace. He is the bond between the inmates and myself. Empowered by me, he serves in the city as the string in a necklace. If that city decays, he collects the inmates together, leads them to another, and remains their master. In this way, Mr. Inconstant rules over cities always, he himself remaining under the sway of his friend. Though supported by such a powerful friend, though born of such a virtuous mother and brought up by me, he is never otherwise than miserable, because he is tossed about by his 2 wives and several sons. He is torn asunder by his sons, and finds not the least pleasure but only intense misery. Tempted by Madame Unsteady, he grieves. Ordered about by Madame Voracious, he runs about in search of food for her. Stricken by Flaming Mouth, he burns with rage, loses his sense, and is baffled. Approaching Master Mean, he is openly despised and reviled by others, and becomes as one dead under the shame of odium. Already of disreputable heredity, and now infatuated by love for and tossed about by his wicked wives and sons, he has been living with them in all kinds of places, good and bad, in forest with woods or thorny bushes, and infested with wild beasts, in deserts burning hot, in icy tracks pierced by cold, in putrid ditches or in dark holes, and so on. Again and again my friend was stricken with grief on account of her son's calamities, and nearly died with sorrow. I, too, though sane and clear by nature, dear, got involved in the affairs of her family and became sad also. Who can hope for even the least happiness in bad company? One may as well seek to quench one's thirst by drinking water from a mirage. Engulfed in sorrow, my friend once sought me in private. Advised by me, she soon gained a good husband, killed her own son, and imprisoned his sons. Then, accompanied by me, she quickly gained my mother's presence, and being pure, she often embraced my mother. She at once dived in the sea of bliss, and became bliss itself. In the same manner, you too can conquer your wrong ways, which are only accretions. Then, my lord, attain the mother, and gain eternal happiness. I have now related to you, my lord, my own experience of the pedestal of bliss. Thus ends the chapter on bondage in the section of Hemachuda in Tripura Rahasya,